Chapter 11. In these past months, I've realized something important. I'm much better at swordsmanship than at archery. There's a key skill in sword combat that I've mastered for years, one that most still don't even understand, and that is not being afraid of your opponent's weapon. And of course, I'm not afraid of bullets, because closing your eyes does nothing against a bullet. You can't dodge it if it's already coming for you. If it's going to kill you, it will, just like that. So why would I fear a long, sharp knife shaped like a sword? Or worse yet, a wooden sword. That difference, that switch in my head that no longer freezes in the face of danger, has given me a massive advantage over the other pages. They're still afraid of getting hit. They don't want a blow to the face, they don't want to be humiliated. I've already been through that. So every time I thrust high, aiming straight for their faces, they flinch. Some step back, others drop their guard, others blink at the worst possible moment. Doesn't matter if my strikes are pathetic, slow, or clumsy. Their fear does the rest. And that, little by little, has allowed me to start dominating. I can now beat half the pages I train with without much difficulty. Between those distracted expecting a kick, those who tremble when I raise the sword near their eyes, and those who can't handle the pressure of someone who doesn't give up or back down, I've been taking them down one by one. I'm far from the best, but I'm no longer the helpless newcomer who didn't even know how to hold a sword. Now they fear me, and for now that's enough. I had finally adapted to the routine. At least I knew what to expect each day of the week. Once a week, clean the latrine. 3 times, the stables. Twice, sweep the fortress halls. Those were the special chores. The rest of the time, it was the usual. Serving meals or acting as cupbearer for the Margrave's family. Being a cupbearer was considered a privilege, but only on paper, because every time I had to stand beside the table, Joachim, the eldest son, wouldn't stop glaring at me with hatred. And if he could give me more work, he did it without hesitation. Commanding, loading, repeating tasks. Any excuse was good to try to wear me down or humiliate me. Going to the market to buy things was more random, but whenever I got that task, I made the most of it. I already knew most of the trustworthy merchants. I'd learned to haggle, to point out flaws, to watch how the locals got their prices lowered. I picked it up fast. Every coin I managed to save on those errands, I hid. I found a loose brick in one of the market buildings, loosened it more, and started using it as a stash. That's where I hid the extra coins. When the Margrave's leftovers were too few or just trash, I used my secret fund to buy decent food. Dried meat, crusty bread, some broth with real flavor. Though of course you had to know how to choose. One time I got overconfident and spent almost all I had saved on a soup from a fancy stall. It looked luxurious, full of spices, with a rich aroma that made your stomach growl. But something was wrong. Not even 2 hours had passed before my gut twisted like a wounded snake. I spent the rest of the day locked in the latrines, cursing every damn coin I had dropped on that damn soup. And of course, as if fate were mocking me, I had to clean the latrine afterward. For a moment, sweating from the pain, I considered stealing. Just once. A quick sleight of hand in the chaos of the market. No one would notice. The temptation was strong. But so was the memory of how justice worked in the Empire. Even being a noble, even being the Margrave's page, I wasn't stupid. They could break my fingers or worse if I got caught. I chose to stay honest. Not out of virtue, out of common sense. The only days one could truly rest were when the Margrave went off to campaign. Sometimes he'd leave because the forests were overflowing with beasts, orcs, or goblins. Other times, because bandits on the road to Bretonnia were disrupting trade. On those days, we only prepared food for those staying behind, and everything was more relaxed. There was also a break when the Margrave left for some party in Altdorf and took his family with him. A whole week without having to endure his fat ass or Joachim's whining. We had free time, though there wasn't much we could do with it. We weren't allowed to leave the fortress except for errands. So all that was left was to train, eat, sleep, and repeat. I spent my days bruising my fingers with the wooden sword. Over and over. Nothing else. Albrecht, wake up, someone said, shaking me by the shoulder. What? I mumbled without opening my eyes. I was sunbathing in a hidden corner of the garden, where warm rays passed through the stone wall. Margrave Reinhardt is looking for all of us. He wants to go hunting. And this time it's going to be a long one, so he wants all the pages to come along, said one of the pages from a noble house in Ussingen. I opened my eyes, sighed, and stood up. But if the Margrave was at a party in Altdorf, shouldn't he be coming back? Next week or something? I asked, mentally going over the calendar we had pinned up next to the kitchen. For some reason he came back early, and now he wants us to get everything ready for a long hunt. So we better get moving. There's a lot to pack and not much time, said the page, already walking quickly toward the main courtyard. And what exactly are we supposed to do? Be living decorations, standing beside the tents like human banners, I said as I stretched, still stiff from the morning's training. I don't know. They just said be useful or hide well, answered the page, then disappeared around the corridor. What a load of crap, I muttered as I stepped outside the fortress, fastening my leather belt. Outside, the activity was frantic. A large entourage was preparing. Servants running, soldiers checking weapons, cooks loading provisions, stable hands holding horses. The air was full of dust and shouted orders. A mountain of gear was being piled up. Spears, crossbows, bows, nets, cages. I even saw a few bear traps. I immediately began to help, loading cargo onto wagons and securing crates. If anyone saw me idle, I'd be given double the work. I already knew that game. When everything was finally ready, I mounted my horse, who now recognized me well, and joined the retinue heading toward the family's hunting grounds. We formed a long column of squires, guards, pages, hunters, nobles, and loaded carriages. We passed through Osberg without stopping and entered the dense woods. The trees rose like black columns above us. Some guards started talking about how beastmen still roamed these areas, or wolves far too large. Eventually, after several hours, we reached a deep clearing in the forest. Some tents were already set up. I assumed others had arrived earlier to prepare the ground. Without wasting time, I set up the tent I'd be sharing with other pages. It wasn't comfortable, but compared to sleeping in the open, it was a luxury. With the help of 2 others, we finished quickly. With that done, I took a few moments to look around, curious about the Margrave's guests. It was one of the few chances I had to see other nobles and their strange companions. That's when I saw him. It was impossible not to notice him. A man shorter than me, but with a torso like an iron barrel. He had a reddish beard, braided and adorned with copper pieces that gleamed in the evening light. A dwarf without a doubt. He was arranging weapons on a campaign table. Short pistols, arquebus, black powder flasks, daggers, hammers. Everything meticulously arranged. The table groaned under the weight. Albrecht, I assume you've finished your tasks if you're already standing idle, said the Margrave, appearing behind me with that voice you could never quite tell if it was a joke or a warning. Of course, my lord. I completed my duties as instructed, I replied instantly. The Margrave's attention turned to the table. His firm steps approached the arsenal, and he stopped beside the dwarf, silently inspecting the weapons. So this is what you brought me this time, dwarf. I suppose it's something much better than last time, said the Margrave, his gaze sweeping over the crowded table. Ah, my lord Manling, about time you showed up. The best my forge can produce, as always, the dwarf replied, running his thick hands over the weapons like he was blessing his metal children. The Margrave turned to me and raised one of the pistols. I assume you've seen something like this before. Only these are unmatched in quality. Only dwarfs can produce a piece so exquisite, worthy of my grand hunt, he said. The dwarf crossed his arms and looked up at the Margrave with an air of pride. Certainly, I said, examining the pistol under the light filtering through the branches. The finish is flawless. I assume it was handworked, since there are no casting lines, I added, watching the pistol in the Margrave's hands. The Margrave raised an eyebrow. And what do you know about firearms, Albrecht? They're expensive. I doubt your father ever bought one. He's always preferred his faithful greatsword, said the Margrave. I've always wanted one, I replied, still focused on the weapon. But as they say, they're expensive. And black powder is hard to come by, I said, turning to look at the arquebus. The Margrave let out a low chuckle. Oh, is that so? Then tell me what you see, he said, handing me the pistol with a sarcastic gesture. The dwarf frowned immediately. He grunted like someone being asked to hand over their firstborn. I took the pistol carefully, feeling its balanced weight. I turned it respectfully, studying every detail. Rifled barrel, I said, gently running a finger inside the muzzle. The spiral grooves inside. They make the bullet spin when fired, giving it better accuracy like an arrow. A difficult and time-consuming job if done by hand. Everything suggests it was. I looked at the dwarf. He no longer frowned. He was watching me with interest. The trigger is light with almost no resistance. That means the internal mechanism is polished and well assembled. The flintlock reacts nearly instantly, so the internal clockwork must be refined. No loose parts. Every piece forged and fitted by hand. Even the stock black wood, I don't know what kind, but probably oiled with tallow and beeswax. A weapon made to last generations. The Margrave raised both eyebrows. The dwarf let out a soft grunt, like someone trying to hide how much they appreciated a compliment. Huh. Didn't expect that. How come? Murmured the Margrave. Nor did I, added the dwarf, now looking at me with a bit more respect. Few manlings can recognize a good weapon when they hold one. Fewer still when they're just a human pup. Albrecht, go, help with the food. You're wasting time here, said the Margrave, taking the pistol from my hands. As you command, my lord, I replied, stepping away. Chapter 12. I'm becoming quite the experienced potato peeler, to be honest, I said as another potato skin fell in long strips onto the table. I tossed them one by one into the pot of boiling water, which hissed and steamed like an old boiler. Like all of us, Albrecht, if we're not here to hunt, we have to make sure everything's ready, said one of the servants, eyes still fixed on the ham he was slicing into perfect rounds. I'm done here. Anything else I need to do? I asked, setting down the knife and stretching my fingers, stiff from the task. No, you're free for now. I'll call you when it's time to prepare everything for serving. In the meantime, make sure you eat something because I doubt there'll be a scrap of meat left. Too many guests for even a bone to remain. So go get some vegetables and make a soup for you and the other pages, said the head servant, tasting the stew in a pot with a critical frown. Great. More work, I muttered deadpan. I grabbed a medium-sized pot and left the tent. I walked toward the one assigned to me for sleeping, passing by the guards setting up the perimeter. I noticed a pile of firewood someone had left a bit too carelessly near the communal fire, and without being noticed, I took a few small pieces. I crouched beside a clear patch of dirt, pulled out my knife, and started shaving thin strips of wood. Then, using a flint and a piece of metal I'd picked up somewhere, I struck sparks. Took a while, but eventually one caught. I blew gently until the fire took hold. Once stable, I added the stolen wood and set the pot on top. I walked over to one of the barrels near the carts and filled it with some water. When I got back, I quickly chopped a few small carrots and 2 leftover potatoes. That was all I had. Shit, I'm gonna go hungry today, I muttered, staring at the watery soup, full of hope but lacking flavor. I guess no one would notice if I borrowed a bow, right? I said under my breath, scanning the surroundings. Everyone was busy. No one was watching me. Casually, I approached the armory tent. No one stopped me, no one asked anything. I took the smallest bow I could find, one just my size. It was a bit bigger than the training one I had back home. I also borrowed a quiver half full of arrows and slipped out as silently as I'd entered. I headed into the woods. It had been months since I last trained with a bow. At the Margrave's estate, all we had was fencing and horseback training. The only experience I had was from the year before, when I'd been gifted my first practice bow. This one was different, heavier, tighter, far harder to use. Probably made for grown men, not boys. I wasn't aiming for a big catch. Just something I could kill, cook, and toss into the pot. Anything with meat. A hare, a bird, some feathered critter. Anything. So I moved quietly, stepping with care, even holding my breath. I wasn't a hunter, nowhere close. Honestly, I had more hope than skill. But hunger works miracles. And need makes even the clumsiest get creative. Before long, I spotted my first target. A decent-sized bird pecking at seeds on the ground a few meters ahead. It hadn't seen me. I drew an arrow from the quiver, set it to the string, took my stance, and couldn't pull the bow. The damn thing was stiff as stone. I tried again, this time putting all my back into it. Managed to draw it. I clenched my jaw, aimed as best I could, held my breath, and released. The bird took off immediately. The arrow landed meters away, buried in the dirt. Didn't even come close. Total disaster. I grunted quietly, retrieved the arrow, and kept looking. And so it went. Miss, adjust, miss again. Some arrows flew meters off, others just a few centimeters. But I wasn't hitting anything. I was getting irritated at my own incompetence. My hands trembled from the effort and my stomach didn't even growl anymore. It just burned. But there was no way I was going back empty-handed. If I was going to borrow a bow and quiver, I'd at least return with something decent to offer in silence. Some gift, to make them forget the temporary disappearance of the gear. I kept prowling between the trees. Saw more birds, but now I moved slower, more carefully. Then I spotted a nest, high on a branch. From below, I saw one of the birds pecking at the edge. I repeated the process, arrow, string, stance. Drew the bow. My arm muscle screamed, but I held. I clenched my teeth, aimed. Released. There was a violent fluttering, followed by a heavy thud on the ground. I ran over, heart pounding. There it was. I hit it, dead on. The bird was still twitching, so without hesitation, I twisted its neck to end it quickly. Its body relaxed. The arrow had destroyed part of its side, so it wouldn't look too pretty in the pot, but it was something. I climbed the tree carefully and claimed 4 eggs from the nest, tucking them gently into a cloth pouch. I didn't know how much time had passed, but the sun was still high. I doubted anyone had noticed my absence yet, so I decided to push my luck a bit more. I kept wandering, though my shots were weaker now, less steady. My arm was shaking, and it was hard just to hold the bow straight. Then, just as I decided to head back, something moved in the grass. Crouched among the bushes, I saw it. A white rabbit, beautiful, already wearing its winter coat. It looked like a patch of snow in the middle of the forest. I didn't have the strength to use the bow, so I went for the oldest weapon in the world, a rock. The rabbit was nervously scanning its surroundings. It had sensed me, but didn't know where the danger was coming from. I moved slowly, carefully, holding my breath. When I was close enough, I hurled the rock with all the precision I could muster. It hit the rabbit square in the head. Tried to run, but its body didn't respond. Twitched, dragging itself with limp hind legs. I rushed in and grabbed it with both hands. "Sorry, little guy. This is gonna hurt you a lot more than it hurts me," I whispered, pushing its head down and snapping its neck in one swift motion. I held it in my hands, still warm. It was a beautiful animal, white fur, perfect for winter. But in that green environment, it stood out like a beacon. Even I could catch it. I gave it a quick inspection and I put it on my belt, along with the bird and the eggs. Now I had a decent excuse for my absence. I started heading back, but it seemed luck wasn't with me. I ran right into Joachim. He had a bow in his hands and was probably doing the same thing I was. We both froze, staring at each other. "What are you doing here? You should be," he started. "Yeah, at the camp." I cut him off flatly. "You're in serious trouble," he said with a smirk, glancing down. "You got a rabbit? And a bird? But how? You and your father. My father always says yours is more like a northern barbarian than an imperial noble, and looks like you're not much different." "Oh, really?" I replied, thinking fast. I noticed his eyes were fixed on my catch. "Give me the rabbit and the bird and I didn't see anything," Joachim said, like he was offering a favor. Hey, I did this to eat," I replied, holding his gaze. "Or would you prefer lashes for sneaking off and stealing that bow? And the arrows?" he said, knowing full well he had the upper hand. His smile was that of someone already feeling victorious. "Maybe I'd prefer that over letting someone else take credit for my work," I said, serious. "Stubborn little bastard, fine. Give me the rabbit and you keep the bird," said Joachim, sighing and running a hand down his face. "And what are you going to do with it?" I asked, holding it out toward him. "Show it to father. A white rabbit in summer. That's good luck for a hunter," Joachim replied, still staring at it. "You're not even going to eat it? If you want, I can skin it and you can show it to your father," I said, a bit annoyed. "It needs to look like I hunted it, or he'll think I stole it from someone, ha ha," he chuckled, reaching out. "Fine, here you go. Now shut your mouth or I'll open mine to your father," I said, handing him the rabbit. "You have my word. How did you kill it?" "No arrow wound. Just a W, one of its eyes is out, a W," said Joachim as he examined it. "I threw a rock and broke its neck. Like this, see?" I said, repeating the movement. "I see. He'll ask how I learned." "He always does, never misses a detail," Joachim said as he started walking back toward the camp. "Tell him you asked me. That you figured, being the son of a northern barbarian, I'd know some tricks, and I'll back you up," I said, continuing with what I had left in my hands. We returned to camp, and I quickly returned everything I had borrowed before sitting down to pluck the bird, gut it with a knife, and start cutting it into pieces. I traded 2 legs for some salt a guard had on hand, and then realized someone had moved the soup because it was already done. I took the chance and tossed the bird pieces into the broth, and serving myself a bowl. By the time I was on my second helping, the others began arriving, tired. "Nice, it's ready." I cut my hands like 4 times. "Hey Albrecht, where did you get chicken?" one of the pages asked, grabbing a wooden bowl to serve himself. "What? They said they'd wait until after the feast to hand out meat." "Did you steal it?" said another, already helping himself. "Eat and shut up, or you can wait hours until they're done drinking wine. And if anyone opens their mouth, I'll break their legs at the next training." "Understood," I said, looking at the group. Even though they were older than me, none dared face me alone. Everyone started eating, taking a small piece of meat I'd left so they'd all be complicit. "Good, everyone ate. If anyone talks, we all go down," I said, picking food from between my teeth with a finger. Their faces lit up at the taste of something decent instead of another bland stew. "What are you looking at? Eat, you ungrateful bastards. I do something nice for you and you're more worried about a punishment that won't come. If no one talks, there's no guilt," I said, stretching. I heard footsteps approaching the tent and immediately stood to block the entrance with my body. Albrecht, father wants to see you," said Joachim, looking tense. "Of course, I always have time for his lordship," I replied, stepping out quickly and following Joachim and his guards. We entered one of the largest tents in the camp, where the air was heavy with spices and the guests were stuffing themselves with endless luxuries. The Margrave was sipping wine and speaking with the same dwarf from earlier, who held a mug of ale. "Father, Joachim started. "Albrecht, my son says you taught him one of your father's tricks. Is that true?" asked the Margrave without delay. "Of course, my lord. Who would I be to refuse help to someone of your lineage? I'm here to serve you," I answered with a serious face, looking him straight in the eye. "Really? You're not lying to me?" said the Margrave, adjusting in his seat and leaning toward me. "You really think I'm dumb enough to lie to your face, Margrave?" I said with an innocent expression. The Margrave laughed, licked his lips, and stared at his son. "Seriously, Joachim?" said the Margrave. "Because this idiot couldn't lie half as well as he struts around acting arrogant." I thought. "Yes, father. He helped me," Joachim said, trembling from nerves. The Margrave shook his head and looked at me. "Very well. Tomorrow we go for big game. No more small prey." "So, Albrecht, you'll go with my son," said the Margrave. "What an honor, Margrave," I said with the fakest smile I could muster. "Yes, a great honor, now go," said the Margrave, and Joachim led me outside. "You owe me one," I said as we walked side by side. He just scowled at me and grabbed a tray from a servant. "I don't owe you anything," he said, handing me a tray full of roasted meats. "See you tomorrow," I said with a grin, quickening my pace, almost running with the food. Chapter 13. I woke up violently, twisting around and grabbing the potato-peeling knife from my belt, breathing hard, heart pounding in my ears. Shit. Again. I'm not in Ukraine, goddammit. Not anymore. Not anymore. I muttered through clenched teeth, trembling. I'd barely slept. Every crack in the forest, every snapping branch, every distant step from a guard triggered my reflexes like I was still in the trenches. "Again, Albrecht?" Someone mumbled from under their blanket, stirring without even opening their eyes. "The sun's not even up yet. Still too early for you to enjoy the hunt. Ungrateful bastard. This is how you repay me for sharing my prize?" I grumbled, putting the knife away and trying to steady my breathing. I got up and stepped outside the tent. I went to the nearest water barrel and splashed my face several times. Something in this forest made my gut churn. I had never reacted like this. Not even when artillery rained down on us. There was something in the air, in the way dawn crept between the trees, that gave me a bad feeling I couldn't explain. Luckily, I'd prepared one of my tricks last night. I took the largest piece of meat from the banquet and boiled it down into jelly with some vegetables. Since the meat was already well seasoned, I didn't need to add anything. I just added flour. Once it hardened, I ground it down into a kind of broth tablet. I only had to throw it into boiling water to make a decent soup. And the best part, as long as no one saw it, I wouldn't have to share with anyone. I tossed the tablet into a wooden bowl and poured in boiling water. I started drinking the flavorful broth, still rich with the spices from yesterday's meat. No idea what animal it was, but it was salty and tingled a bit on the tongue. That strong, meaty taste felt good when hot. As I drank, the camp started to wake up, the men stirring and moving about. I stayed close to the wagons, where I was supposed to wait for the rest of the hunting party, noticing crates with tied-up pigs nearby. Ugh! These bastards denying us a single scrap of meat while keeping these nice fat pigs here. I muttered, looking at the cart's contents. When I saw the nobles starting to arrive, I prepared my horse and waited patiently, with a second bowl of soup and a piece of bread I'd stolen from a careless servant. The Margrave came out but ignored me entirely, heading to join the other nobles dressed in fine clothes, looking like upper-rank bureaucrats. Albrecht, came Joachim's familiar voice, though strangely lacking its usual arrogance. Yeah, I answered after finishing the bowl. What do you mean, yeah? Shouldn't it be at your service, my lord? He added, arrogance returning to his tone. That's for your father? Or when you beat me in a spar, Lord Sculpted Legs? I said with a smirk, grinning with irony. You should be ashamed to fight like that, Joachim replied. You need to learn to control that ego, Joachim. You fall for provocations too easily. And as much as I'd like to keep pushing your buttons, looks like we're heading out soon. So, you ready? I said, leaning on my thigh while keeping my horse steady by the reins. Have you ever hunted wild boar? Joachim asked. Not personally, but my father likes to talk about how he stalks prey. He likes to take his time with the hunt, and he's always very detailed about it, I said, looking out toward the horizon, mentally preparing for what was coming. Good. I can always count on you and your northern barbarian tactics, Joachim said, relaxing a bit. So now you're going to help me hunt one, he added proudly. Are you crazy? That's one of the most dangerous things to hunt, and you expect me to help, I replied, raising an eyebrow and surveying the area. My father said he'd take me on the next military campaign to clear some mountain passes of orcs. If I bring back a big game trophy, a boar or a stag, it would be enough, Joachim explained, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Ha, good luck with that. A stag needs a skilled archer, and I can barely pull a small bow. Even if I hit one, I doubt it'd die. And boars are hunted with spears and hounds. I don't see any dogs with you, I said, holding back a laugh. If I managed to get you out of the worst chores in your service, would you consider it? Joachim asked, sounding nervous. I'd be risking my hide. Though not having to clean the damn latrines sounds fantastic, I get to keep some of the meat, though. Deal? I offered my hand with a cocky smile. Fine, Joachim said, brushing off my hand. Grab a few spears. We're going. And who's coming with us? I asked, noticing we were heading out alone. Just 2 guards. The rest are going with my father's group, Joachim said. Lovely, I muttered, dismounting. I grabbed a couple of spears from what was available, some rope, and also took a bow and a few boxes. Better to have them and not need them than need them and not have them. We set off quickly, heading into the forest. We rode until the terrain flattened out, always scanning the area. We kept going until something caught my eye. I dismounted and saw clear signs of what I was looking for, remembering what father always said when talking about how he stalked prey in the woods. Look here, these tracks are from a boar. See the ground? One clearly used its tusks here to dig for something, I said, crouching and examining the marks. Joachim rode up and looked at me, puzzled. You sure? How do you know it's a boar? Honestly, I don't. But it's worth trying here, I said, scanning for a nearby tree. And now what? Where do we look? Joachim asked, glancing around. You and I climb that big tree over there. We'll toss some food beneath it. If we can get up to the branches, we'll be able to see if a boar comes from afar. The food should draw it in, and from above we throw the spear. With some luck, we pierce a lung or the heart, I explained, pointing at the large nearby tree. You sure? He asked, still skeptical. Is that one of your father's techniques? Yeah, my father's, I replied, carefully keeping secret the fact that he actually used hounds and preferred to hunt personally. While I was using a method I saw in a video once when I was bored in Africa, I started climbing the tree, making my way up to a high branch that was well covered in leaves. My clothes, in dull tones, blended perfectly with the surroundings, but Joachim's weren't as camouflaged. His bright colors made him easy to spot, so I told him to cover himself with a piece of cloth I had brought to sleep with, just in case we needed to camp away from the main camp. I made sure to tie the rope around my torso and secure it to the tree for safety. I took position, 2 spears in hand, keeping watch for any movement in the area. Joachim began to climb, but obviously he wasn't very skilled at it. He needed the guard's help to get up, and once he was halfway there, I had to climb back down to give him a hand getting onto the branch where he'd be decently hidden. The guards began tossing down bread and some grain that was supposedly for them and the horses. Then they withdrew, leaving just Joachim and me up in the tree. For long minutes we stayed in silence, observing the area, alert for any sign of movement. "Hey, how much low?" Joachim started. "Shoo!" I gestured for silence, putting a finger to my lips, and we focused again on the weight. We stayed like that for hours atop the tree, watchful. A few rabbits came near, attracted by the bait, but we scared them off quickly. As expected, they darted away in the opposite direction. Suddenly, a group of deer approached, but they must have seen Joachim's colorful clothes and got spooked, fleeing instantly. The weight was starting to wear on Joachim, and he looked close to losing patience when finally, we heard something in the distance. I turned my head and saw a group of 5 wild boars approaching. I looked at Joachim and saw the excitement in his eyes. "Let them come closer, go for the male on the count of 3. I whispered as we watched the boars get nearer. We waited calmly as they approached. I needed Joachim to stay focused, so I kept my hand open, signaling that we had to wait for the right moment. The boar had to get close enough to expose its vital spots. When we had a clear angle, I raised 3 fingers at Joachim and slowly lowered them one by one. I took my spear and threw it. Joachim did the same. My spear hit the mark, piercing the boar's lung. It began to grunt in pain, thrashing at the weapon while blood poured from its snout. It tried to flee but collapsed not far from us. Joachim's spear struck the young boar, piercing its spine and killing it instantly. The rest of the group fled the area. "Good, damn it," I muttered, staring at my downed prey. "Yes," Joachim shouted, beginning to climb down. "Hey, hold on. Mine's still alive. Wait until it bleeds out a bit before we go down," I said, grabbing the second spear. Joachim sighed, and we waited a few more minutes. Once the boar's spasms stopped, we untied ourselves from the ropes and climbed down. "For a young one, it's pretty big. It must have been nearly full-grown," I said, pulling the spear from the wound and tying up its legs. "Yeah, perfect. Let's check the other one now, the one that actually matters. Unlike this one, that one died instantly." "A perfect throw," said Joachim. "Meh, you got lucky. I said to go for the male and you hit the young one, which you weren't supposed to do. But we can smoke it and make some nice ham out of it. Or, since it's young, roast it with some vinegar so the skin crisps up," I said, thinking about what we could do with the day's catch. We finally reached the adult boar, and I got ready in case it moved. "It's dead. Look at that beauty of a hit. I got both lungs," I said, pulling out the spear and inspecting the hole it had made. "All right, let's bring the horses and get out of here before the blood draws in some predator." As we started moving through the open area, we caught the attention of the guards, who quickly arrived with the horses. We wasted no time getting the prey onto their mounts and began heading back. As we rode deeper into the forest, I stayed alert to every sound. With a bleeding animal among us, it wouldn't be strange to attract a wolf or two, and we had to be ready for a pack. The air felt heavy, charged with a tension I couldn't ignore. While I kept scanning the surroundings, something caught my attention at the edge of the treeline. I saw a tall, muscular figure covered in thick fur. I couldn't take my eyes off the abomination standing right in front of us. "Beast man," I shouted, pointing at the creature as it approached with steady, deliberate steps. My cry of alarm rang through the air, and everyone stopped in their tracks. Chapter 14. I stood still, watching the creature. It was one thing to see an illustration or hear my father talk about how to hunt one, and something entirely different to have it right in front of me. It was pure muscle, tall, with thick arms and some armor on its legs. But everything else was covered in thick fur, and its head was like that of a ram, with horns curled backward. Its mouth was full of a mix of saliva and blood, which only added to the grotesque sight. In its hands it held a large chunk of metal that resembled a sword, though it looked horribly made, like some blacksmith had forged it without the slightest idea of what he was doing. The guards, seeing the threat, drew their swords quickly and moved to stand between us and the beastman, trying at the same time to keep their horses under control, as the animals grew restless from the creature's presence. The stench was unbearable, a mix of rotting meat and a dense stink, like the latrines of a barracks. It came from its thick fur and sweat, clinging to the air and making me want to cover my nose. Breathing grew harder with every step the beast took. Luckily, the guards, though clearly tense, were well-armed knights, as expected from the Margrave's men. Clad in full-plate armor, they began to position themselves, ready to face the threat. "It's just one. I'll distract him, you flank," said one of the guards, pointing his sword toward the creature as it prepared to charge. The other guard nodded and began guiding his horse sideways while the beastman growled, as if gauging the perfect moment to strike. Joachim, don't wander off. Look, I started to say, turning to the one we were supposed to protect, when something in the brush caught my eye. Another one, watch out, I shouted as I saw another of those creatures burst out from behind a tree, a massive brute wielding a large axe, rushing at Joachim with terrifying speed. Joachim managed to turn just enough to use his horse as a shield. The beast struck hard, almost beheading the mount in one swing that the horse staggered and collapsed, Joachim falling backward, narrowly avoiding having his leg crushed under the beast's weight. The horse, in its death throes, kicked wildly, not realizing it was already dead. I didn't think. I spurred my horse into a gallop and grabbed one of my spears. I hurled it with all the force I had, aiming at the beastman advancing on the Margrave's son. The spear flew through the air and hit the beast in the chest, near the right side, but it didn't pierce as deeply as I'd hoped, probably because of its tough hide or because I lacked an adult's strength. Wasting no time, I grabbed the second spear, held it with both hands, and aimed directly for the heart. The beast yanked the first spear from its chest, growling furiously, and raised its weapon to strike me. Before it could reach me, the second spear drove deep into the center of its chest, and just then, my horse rammed into it, sending the beast flying. Now disarmed and unsure of how durable these things really were, I chose not to take chances. I spurred my horse again and had it stomp hard on the beastman. Again and again, I made it trample the creature's torso and head until it stopped moving. After several hits, the beast finally lay still, lifeless. I turned and saw Joachim still in shock, and the guards had already killed the first beastman, but more were coming. The guards were readying themselves to face two more beastmen heading their way. I looked down and saw the second spear I had thrown was broken, but the first one, still stained with the beast's foul blood, was intact. I approached Joachim, dismounted, and grabbed the spear. "Snap out of it, idiot," I said, slapping him twice as I breathed heavily. "Get on my horse and wait. If I come back without you, your father's going to kill me anyway." "The boar," Joachim muttered, looking at the boar carcass tied to the horse. "What the hell does that matter now? You need to live, dumbass," I said, grabbing his clothes and helping him up onto my horse. Finally, Joachim got on. I took my spear and looked toward the two remaining beastmen who were still fighting the knights. These ones were smarter. They used the trees, their branches, and roots to deny the horses any advantage. They kept ducking behind cover and only came out when they could strike with surprise. I moved in from the right, and while one of the beastmen was distracted, I stabbed my spear into its thigh. I heard the creature grunt and snarl in pain as I twisted the spear to inflict a wound that would bleed it out. I pulled the spear free with effort and retreated behind one of the knights. The beast, enraged, tried to go after me, but the knight's sword came down fast, severing its arm in a single blow. What looked like an iron club dropped to the ground, useless. Taking advantage of the creature writhing in pain, I used the full reach of my spear and drove it into its neck, twisting it again. The hole I left was deep. The knight quickly moved to assist his companion. The beast, cornered, stood atop the roots of a tree, swinging blindly, trying to keep the knights at bay. "Boy, give me the spear." "Don't take the risk," said one of the knights, clearly reading my intention to finish it off. I tossed him the spear, and almost instantly he hurled it with force, pinning the beastman against the tree. Meanwhile, the other knight dismounted and rushed forward, slicing off the creature's head with his sword. The danger seemed to be over, and the knights were starting to clean their swords of the beast's blood. "The page killed too," one knight said, looking at the beast I had stomped to a pulp with my horse's hooves and the one I had speared through the neck. "Sounds like a damn joke. But yeah, the boy's got guts. Let's get out of here before more of those things show up." Taking advantage of the moment, I grabbed the boar from Joachim's horse and loaded it onto one of the knights. Then I got back on my own horse, riding alongside Joachim, and in silence we began the return to camp. We didn't spot any more beastmen, but kept our distance, following the same trail back without further incident. After a long while of scanning the woods around us for any sign of danger, we finally made it back to camp. I let out a breath of relief, glad to finally be out of that mess. I'd rather watch from afar than be the one fighting those stinking monsters up close. I took the young boar Joachim had killed, until he presented it to his father and got what he wanted. It was still mine. I got a knife from the butcher and began prepping it. First, I cut it down from the rope, holding it up, and laid it on a clean surface. I started slicing along its belly with the knife, careful not to puncture the organs. Its skin was soft but thick, and I had to make careful cuts to peel it without tearing it too much. I separated the hide from the meat in steady motions, cutting around the legs, ears, and head, keeping the hide mostly intact. The smell wasn't anywhere near as bad as those beasts we had just fought. Once the hide was off, I began cutting the meat into smaller portions. I started with the hind legs, they were the thickest, then moved on to the back and flanks. Even young, it had a strong flavor that could spoil if not handled properly. I placed the cuts on a table, ready to be smoked if needed. Wild boar meat is tougher than most, so it would need special preparation. After what felt like a long time working, I began to set up a rack made of sticks and string to hang the cuts, letting the heat and smoke do their job. The scent of curing meat began mixing with the fresh forest air. I was completely focused when someone finally came to interrupt me. Wow. They must be drunk. The Margrave has summoned you, said a knight who approached me. I nodded and followed him into the tent, where many nobles and guests were gathered in a festive atmosphere. There was tension in the air, but clearly, for now, the nobles didn't care about the beastmen threat. I noticed that the head of the boar I had killed was decorating the center of one of the banquet trays, like a trophy. The Margrave, upon seeing it, ran his hands down his face, visibly tired. Albrecht, I've just been told you were attacked by beastmen during the hunt. But when they briefed me, they told me the absurd claim that you killed two yourself, said the Margrave with a surprised look on his face. Not two. But one, yes. With the other, I helped by spearing it through the thigh to flush it out so the knight could land his blow, and I finished it off, I replied quickly, without dressing it up. The Margrave leaned back in his chair, licked his lips, as if unsure whether to believe me. Come, walk with me, he said, motioning for me to follow. I walked with him to what looked like his private tent. The Margrave poured himself a cup of wine, drank slowly, then looked straight at me. Listen, thank you for saving my son. It never even crossed my mind that there might be beastmen in that area when I let you go hunting. The trackers told me it was safe, said the Margrave, his face serious, thoughtful. It was my duty, I answered, without much emotion. If it weren't for you, I'd have lost my son by my own fault, the Margrave said, almost as if thinking out loud. Your fault? I asked, puzzled. The hunt is meant to hunt beastmen, to test weapons. All those rich bastards from Altdorf fight to get invited, chasing the thrill of killing chaos beasts with little risk. I charged a mountain of gold to bring several guests here, and I arranged for Bates beastmen couldn't resist your father's advice, the Margrave said. Oh, brutalized pigs? Or deformed babies to lure them in? I said, recalling my father's tricks. Yes, seems you know too. Your father has a lot of tricks up his sleeve. He said the more brutal the bloodshed, the more it draws them in like flies. And today we were testing weapons from our friend in the mountains to hunt them. Didn't think some would stray off. If you were a squire, I'd say you're worthy of being knighted, said the Margrave, a hint of admiration in his tone. Thank you, my lord, I replied, trying to sound respectful, though I already knew what was coming. But you're not, so don't get your hopes up. When you're 12, I'll let you become a squire early. Now go back to whatever you were doing, said the Margrave, refilling his cup with wine. And with nothing else to say, I returned to my task. Chapter 15. The hunt continued, and frequently, almost constantly, gunshots could be heard. Though to be honest, they sounded more like explosions, since black powder released a massive cloud of smoke. There wasn't any system to direct or muffle the sound, so it echoed for kilometers. All I can say is that the Margrave had built himself a hell of a business. All he did was set up the bait and hand out weapons to groups of nobles, who then showered him in gold for the chance to kill a beastman, cut off its head, and use it as a trophy. The camp had changed a lot in the last few days. It had filled with artists and writers painting nobles beside the corpses of slain beasts, mimicking some of the iconic poses of Sigmar. The writers filled pages with stories about the nobility of the hunt. Taxidermists had also arrived, working the hides into decorative mounts to make the beasts look almost alive. It was a parade of idiots emptying their wallets in exchange for a bit of glory and prestige back in the capital, trying to present themselves as beast slayers in the eyes of Altdorf citizens, fueling political campaigns, romantic pursuits, and, of course, the cult of Sigmar, fulfilling its mandate to wipe out all evil within the Empire's reach. Fortunately, I was making a profit too. The Margrave had thanked me for saving his heir, and released me from any duty during this time. And for a while, there was only one topic at the banquet: my father. Apparently, he had been a famed beastman hunter and an accomplished Carroburg greatswords. In his youth, He hunted those monsters wherever they lurked, and after retiring from the regiment as a baron, he continued the hunt without rest, keeping his lands nearly free of that threat. And when the news spread that I, barely 10 years old, had already killed 2 beastmen, they immediately saw me as his successor. My father would have been puffing his chest with pride if he had heard about it. I took the opportunity to sell my family's expertise to help the nobles hunt. The truth is, it was all about being smart, reading the terrain, spotting the best places for visibility, and knowing what lured the beasts. With the knowledge my father passed down through long talks about his hunts, and a bit of what I'd read, I was on par with the experienced local hunters. And for what I was charging, no, let's be honest, I was scamming the city nobles, selling them valuable advice for a handful of gold coins, just to point out the best spots to find their prey. While they prepped their gear, I stayed busy, waiting a few minutes until finally, a beastman appeared, drawn by the blood of a sacrificial pig that had been splashed across the ground. I watched them use their weapons, taking down a few beasts or small groups. My job was to help carry the bodies back to camp, holding out my hand as we returned. The nobles, thrilled with their successful hunts, handed me small bags of silver coins, and sometimes a gold one. In a single week, I was probably earning more than a peasant would in 10 years. And all because I was riding on my father's reputation as a beastman hunter. I piled up the gold and silver coins I had earned, 40 gold coins and 942 in silver. A small fortune to some, a minor shopping spree for others. I had planned to buy a dwarven arquebus, but they were extremely expensive. A quality model went for around 150 gold crowns, which left me with just over half the cost. The beastman presence was growing, probably due to the high concentration of humans in the area, the amount of bait used, and the corpses left behind. They only took the heads and left the rest to rot, the stench drawing more in. Leaving camp without a good position was becoming more dangerous by the day. So I decided to use my earnings on something that could help me stay alive while I kept charging these city nobles. It pained me, but I spent 10 crowns buying a hunting spear from that dwarf, or rather, that professional swindler. Still, the spear was the best I'd seen. Razor sharp with a shaft made of what looked like sturdy wood. It should hold up well enough. That said, a state army-grade spear would have cost a quarter of that price, but the quality are very different. The most expensive part, surprisingly, was buying fabric and paint from the artists. I had to act fast. I had no clue how to make pigments or which plants to look for, so I found a painter who wasn't having much success selling his services and bought the paints he had. Moss green, black, brown, and gray, and started painting the fabric. Once the fabric dried, I used needle and thread to add a second layer to my clothes, which now looked like a decent bit of camouflage trying to imitate forest colors. If things went south during a hunt, this might help me get away. Survival wasn't guaranteed, but I was hoping with all my heart that this costly attempt at camouflage would actually work and not backfire on me. For all I knew, it could make me stand out more and turn me into a giant target. I even draped the fabric over my horse, painted the same way, tying it down with the saddle straps, leaving everything covered except for the head. All set, said the city noble who'd hired me as his guide, eyeing my outfit. New local fashion trend? No, yes, fashion, I replied, changing my mind before explaining what it actually was. Better than anything I've seen in Altdorf, honestly. All right, I need you to take me somewhere with a decent number of beastmen. I want to kill a lot, to be honest, said the noble as he mounted his horse. How many escorts do you have? I asked as we neared the camp's edge. 50, the noble replied. I came to a sudden stop. A lot of men for a hunt? What are you planning? I asked, staring at him. Gaining prestige. I'm aiming for a position in Altdorf city courts, and, well, killing a large number of these abominations never hurts in securing the support of the cult of Sigmar, and, well, a minotaur, said the noble. You're insane. Those things are extremely dangerous. That should be a job for a state regiment, I replied to his request. I'm not insane. I'm well prepared, said the noble as he kept riding and motioned toward his escort. Damn, no expense spared here. Plate armor, all of them armed with arquebus. These are regiment's grade, right? I asked as I observed the escort arquebus. No, a custom order from a gunsmith in Nuln. I understand you're a Reinfield. My father met yours back when he worked in his court, a bar fight case from a few decades ago. Your father killed 3 commoners and a noble with his bare hands. My father described him as a beast that knew no fear and a hound when it came to beastmen. I thought you, young as you are, would be the same, maybe even better. Everyone's talking about how you killed a gore by yourself. But maybe I was wrong. Are you afraid? The noble asked, staring at me. Ha ha, ha. What a pathetic attempt to use my pride to motivate me. I'm brave. I'm a damn hunting dog that won't let go of its prey until it's dead. But I'm not stupid. Minotaurs are rarely alone, and often accompanied by decent groups of beastmen. So, I suggest you take that hand out of your pocket and pay me a lot more than what we agreed on, I said with a grin. He let out a smug snort. Fine, how much do you want? The noble asked, clearly pleased with himself. We agreed on 6 crowns. I want 50 if I manage to find you a minotaur per head, I replied. Outrageous? But no local hunter accepted my offer. So deal, Rienfield. Let us, said the noble, and his entire escort started following us. Stealth was definitely off the table with all that metal clanging around. We'd be attracting the attention of everything nearby. Fortunately, after so many outings, I was familiar with the nearby terrain and knew how to move so we could always be in a favorable position, whether on horseback or atop a hill with a wide field of view. The sound of the arquebus was like cannon fire. The escorts didn't flinch. As soon as a beastman stepped within 70 meters, it was left with a fist-sized hole in its chest. Apparently, my outfit was working, because at one point I made eye contact with 2 beastmen, and they didn't notice me until they picked up my scent. So it's fair to say the investment paid off. It was always the same. Move ahead, scan the area, climb a tall tree to scout the surroundings, spot the next tree or high point with a good view, and continue. Every now and then, I'd hide among the escort and let them handle the beasts trailing us. Several hours passed, and some of the extra horses pulling carts were now loaded with gore and unger heads. On one of my climbs, I noticed something, 2 massive figures moving toward us. I couldn't tell exactly what they were, but it was obvious they were huge and close. I climbed down quickly, agile on the branches, then mounted my horse and galloped back to the city nobles group. 2 of very big and very angry ones nearby, I said, pointing in the direction I had seen them. Excellent. This turned out to be easier than I thought. Worth every coin I'll pay you, Rienfield, said the noble. Hey, it's not over yet. We still have the hardest part left. Killing them. So don't start celebrating just yet, I replied. Advice? Is there a place where we can get a good position to fire all our weapons at once? Asked the noble. The hill where I climbed the tree had few trees. It could give you a clear view of the targets. The problem is they might have already left the area. We need someone to catch their attention and lure them into the kill zone. Then everything will be ready, I said, pointing at the tree. All right, let's go. Rienfield, lure them toward us. Yes, I'm paying you extra. I'm not sending someone wrapped in steel to be chased by minotaurs. So get to it, the noble said before I could charge him more. Without another word, I spurred my horse toward where the minotaurs should be. I started shouting. In one of those shouts, I saw them, massive figures with bull heads and eyes glowing red with rage staring straight at me. All right, I've got their attention, time to run, I said, spurring the horse toward the hill. I could hear the heavy stomps behind me. Those beasts were charging fast. If they had sent one of the guys in armor, he'd be dinner already, I said as I looked back and saw the minotaurs dangerously close. I kept riding and finally reached the hill. I saw the nobles' escorts already in position, aiming their arquebus. I galloped laterally to their line, and soon the familiar roar of gunfire erupted. A massive wall of smoke rose. I turned back and saw the 2 minotaurs on the ground, trying to get up. Their bodies were riddled with holes, growling in fury, pouring blood from their mouths and noses. One of their arms gave out, collapsing beneath its own weight. The noble didn't hesitate. He came out holding a spear and, with perfect aim, drove it into their necks, finishing both with a single precise thrust. One of his escorts, armed with an axe, started cutting off the heads. Both were loaded onto the carts, and we returned to camp, collecting 3 more dozen heads just on the way back. Back at camp, I was handed a small chest full of gold coins, probably more than I had asked for. The noble looked quite pleased with his prize, and during the entire day's banquet, he was the center of attention, telling everyone how he bravely slew 2 minotaurs on his own. I didn't have to wait long to see him being painted by an artist, with 1 minotaur's head beneath his feet, while a taxidermist worked on the other. The extra is for the silence, I said while watching him pose. By the next day, I already had a line of city nobles wanting to pay me to take them to the minotaurs, though few of them had the same level of escort as the noble aspiring to be a judge.